That night, Mary barges through the door, running for the bathroom, vomiting. She has diarrhea. By morning, she just looks like she's on her deathbed.
A woman frantically called 911 to report that her young son, Conrad Roy, was missing.
What kind of truck does he drive?
Ford 250. It's a diesel, big black, and it's got a bunch of stickers on the back window.
I was really concerned that something happened to him.
This detail made this case different from the thousands of others.
Conrad was dealing with a lot of insomnia. He had trouble sleeping, and his anxiety and depression made him feel like he was a failure, which he was not.
Even the police officers understood the gravity of the situation and quickly sprung into action.
Lynn had told me that he had had thoughts of suicide in the past, that he was on medication, and that he had been treated for an overdose some months before. That's a concern. And I felt a sense of urgency that I couldn't put it on the back burner. Not this particular case.
The police searched far and wide for the boy, but their efforts weren't fruitful. Finally, this happened.
At the corner of my eye, I see the black Ford F-250. I'm hoping that I find the young man either asleep inside the vehicle or not in the vehicle.
The scene inside the car shocked the officers. Conrad was found lifeless and cold.
And as soon as I walk up to the truck and I see him inside, I realize right away that the situation is hopeless. My emotions gut me for a second.
The police also found this in the car.
I was able to find his driver's license, and I was able to confirm that it was indeed Conrad Roy. His skin color was mottled. That was an indication to me of some sort of poisoning. And you could vaguely smell that sickly sweet smell of internal combustion engine.
Police discover a portable generator stuffed in the back of the truck. It appears to Korea that Conrad has killed himself with the carbon monoxide fumes from the generator.
Although the boy's death could have been ruled as an ordinary suicide, evidence from his phone changed the whole story.
I didn't expect to find something like that on the phone. It showed that maybe there was more to the story. There was only one thread on the phone, and that was with a female.
The person on the other end was a girl from Plainville, Mass. By the name of Michelle Carter, who was also a teenager. Michelle came from a very normal family, lived in a nice upscale type of neighborhood.
Michelle and Conrad were in a relationship, but it wasn't an ordinary one.
Even though Conrad and Michelle both lived in Massachusetts, they met in Florida while on vacation. Conrad was 16 at the time. Michelle was 15.
She lived 45 minutes away from, his hometown, and so they saw each other a few times through the years after that.
While they seemed to have real feelings for each other, Conrad and Michelle's romance was mostly virtual.
Their text messages revealed shocking truths.
Detectives Gordon and Cudmore scrolled through the messages Michelle sent Conrad in the days leading up to his suicide.
There were thousands of text messages between Conrad and Michelle.
I'll always remember that I sat there and I looked at him and I said, it's my opinion, but without her influence, he's alive today. And Scott said the same exact thing.
Most of the text messages in the last 2 weeks prior to his death were encouraging him and assisting him and telling him that he had to commit suicide.
Shortly, the case shifted from suicide to that of manslaughter, but there were limitations.
To us, it started to feel not like a suicide and more of some sort of manslaughter.
Well, in Massachusetts, there's no clear law that prevents someone from counseling suicide. Just the initial gut feeling of reading those texts, I knew it was wrong, what was being said.
Soon, a search warrant was issued for Michelle's phone. Upon digging in, the police found one single text that changed everything.
One of the texts showed that she knew what she did.
He got out of the truck. He wanted to live. And she was able to, without even physically being there, she was able to coach him back into that truck.
Almost 3 years after the boy's death, this was the judgment after the trial.
Ms. Carter, please stand. This court now finds you guilty.
This is what Conrad's mother had to say about this.
I felt a sense of peace. My son was heard, and his voice was heard. And for me, that is, that's victory.
It is crazy to think that this cold-hearted criminal would have gotten away if the messages weren't checked, and Conrad's brutal death would have been ruled out as a suicide. This twisted case will blow your mind. Carrie Farver had just started dating David Krupa. Here's how they met.
Carrie Farver was originally a customer at my shop. She was very pretty, very confident, and she was super smart. That's why she was attracted to me. I don't know, I'm a pretty mundane blue-collar guy, but we were on the same page. We were both just looking to go out and have a good time.
But soon, things started to get weird.
That morning, when I left the house at about 6:30 a.m., she was on the couch with her laptop and phone. I said, "See you later, have a nice day." Later that morning, I'm at work, and I get a text from Carrie that says, "Can we move in together?" Now, that was extremely left field because after dating for 2 weeks, Carrie made it very clear to me that if we have a relationship, it's nothing serious. So I just texted back, "That's not gonna happen." And immediately I'm getting these texts, "Fine, I hate you, go away, you've ruined my life," just on and on and on. It was like, what the hell? But then you start thinking, well, I guess I've only known her for 2 weeks. If it's gonna be like this, okay.
Carrie lived just a few minutes away from her mother, Nancy, and the both of them were very close. But everything changed after the breakup.
All of a sudden, Nancy was getting these strange texts from Carrie. It just didn't sound like Carrie at all. So Nancy texted back, "You need to call. I need to hear your voice." But Carrie would not pick up the phone.
For 3 days, Nancy waits to hear from her daughter. Carrie never calls. Her mother knows something's wrong. She turns to the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office for help and asks them to find her missing daughter.
Here's where things get interesting. David received threatening messages and emails from her.
No one had heard her voice or seen her since mid-November 2012. But it was also really confusing because there was plenty of evidence online that Carrie seemed to be fine.
While Carrie's out of sight, she's never out of mind for Dave. He receives texts day and night.
The messages and emails were just all over the place. Anywhere from, "I hate you," to, "Oh, I love you so much, we should have babies," and it would go on and on.
Here is an interesting turn of events.
I met Liz via online dating. We were on and off. She had 2 children who coincidentally were very close to the age of my son and daughter. She was sexy.
After David and Liz rekindled their romance, even stranger things happened.
And I would be hanging out, and we'd both start getting threatening messages from Carrie at the same time. Messages like, "Dave's mine, I love Dave, I hate you." It was almost surreal. It was weird too, because they had never really met. Her and Liz probably saw each other for 5 seconds or so outside my apartment. No words were exchanged.
Liz couldn't tolerate the harassment anymore and reported it to the Omaha police.
Liz reported the harassment to the Omaha police. So the police there were trying to find Carrie Farver. And in Iowa, Carrie was still a missing person.
Interesting thing about this case, there's basically 2 different investigations going on.
Then David made a shocking discovery.
I'm driving around the apartment complex, and I notice there's one truck that is not cleaned off. It's still got a foot of snow on it. I start looking a little closer, and I see it looks kind of similar to Carrie's. So I called the sheriff.
And they ran the license plate. It was Carrie's vehicle. The vehicle was taken into a police impound to be processed.
The forensics department found this.
There was a mint tin in the center cup holder in the front seat, and our crime scene tech, she was able to lift a fingerprint off of the mint tin. The print was run through the national database, and unfortunately, we didn't get any hits.
Nothing was making sense anymore. Finally, the police concluded this.
So at that point, we started working on the premise that she was deceased and that somebody had been posing as Carrie this whole time.
To find out if there's an imposter, detectives have to follow a long and winding digital road.
So I started going through all the original case reports, and I noticed that Liz Golyer's name keeps popping up. We're seeing all these harassment complaints that Liz Golyer's making.
Although the digital route was long and winding, it revealed crucial details.
The original investigators got phone downloads from Dave Krupa and Liz Golyer back in early 2013. I found a couple things on that download that were really interesting. There was several phone calls made from Liz's phone to Carrie's home phone about a week before Carrie went missing. They used the *67 prefix, so it disguises your number when you're calling. Liz had in the past said that she didn't really know Carrie, so it was odd to us that she would have been calling Carrie. Also on Liz's phone download was a picture of Carrie Farver's vehicle. I was able to look at the metadata of that photo and found that it was taken weeks before law enforcement or Dave even knew where that vehicle was. Getting all this evidence, the case takes a big turn for us.
That wasn't the end of it.
As we're looking into all these emails and texts and everything else, we are finding that Liz is sending messages under the name Carrie Farver. She's the one who's doing these impersonations.
Liz had been posing as Carrie this whole time, and I believe that she had killed Carrie at that point, but I couldn't prove it. We need evidence, and we need details of what happened to Carrie if we're ever going to charge Liz.
The question of where Carrie Farver was still a mystery.
That changes 5 weeks later, when detectives get the lab results from Carrie's SUV.
It's Carrie's blood that was in her vehicle. This is what we needed to charge Liz for the homicide of Carrie Farver.
4 years after Carrie Farver vanished into thin air, police arrest Liz Goyer and charge her with first-degree murder.
As the trial progressed, it became clear that Liz was the vicious murderer. From an old memory card, the police uncovered a photo to prove this.
It was a picture of what appeared to be a foot with a tattoo on it.
This isn't just a foot. This is a foot that's in the state of decomposition. And it turns out that's the tattoo that Carrie had. What this definitively tells the judge is that, unfortunately, Carrie's dead, but even more.
When they found the photo of the foot, I knew it was going to be a much harder case. It made a huge difference because they had evidence, not the body, but evidence of a body part that helped substantiate the murder.
So, nearly 5 years after Carrie's murder, Liz was sentenced to life without parole. Mary Yoder was a busy chiropractor who had a quick drink of a protein shake and rushed back to work. But little did she know that it was the last meal of her life.
By the end of that day, she's calling her husband, Bill, saying, "Don't get dinner ready for me because I feel horrible right now. I'm not going to be eating." That night, Mary barges through the door, running for the bathroom, vomiting. She has diarrhea. By morning, she just looks like she's on her deathbed. And he says immediately, I put her in the car and we head off to the emergency room.
The doctors were puzzled because they had never seen anything like this before.
They ran several tests. It wasn't the flu. It wasn't any of the comic stomach bugs going around.
She starts having cardiac events in the middle of the night. They resuscitate her with a defibrillator that goes on several times where they actually restart her heart and bring her back. Mary Yoder went through living hell for the last 36 hours of her life. Present at the hospital when Mary does pass away is her husband, Bill, all 3 of her children, along with Caitlin Conley, who's the office manager, and her son's on-again, off-again girlfriend.
Autopsy results revealed shocking truths.
The autopsy was performed by Dr. Kenneth Clark out at the Onondaga County Medical Examiner's Office. And as he's looking under slides of cells from her individual organs, the cells appear like they are killing themselves. That is his first clue that something may have been introduced into the body that actually caused this death.
Soon the cause of death was found out.
Based upon the timetable of events of when Mary becomes symptomatic to the time of death, along with the cardiac events she is leaning on, that is a typical colchicine poisoning.
The investigators were at their wits' end, trying to find out how the poisoning had occurred. But then a single letter changed everything.
2 letters show up. One shows up to the medical examiner's office. One shows up to the sheriff's department. It's the same anonymous letter.
The letter directs us to one person and one person only, and that's Adam Yoder, Mary Yoder's youngest son. He said now the colchicine container is under the front passenger side of his Jeep. That's where he said it was until he figures out where to dispose of it next.
Adam was investigated and interviewed by the police.
A couple hours into the interview, we explained the scenario about how we received this letter, and we want to look into his Jeep. Another investigator, Investigator Simmons, is searching in the exact spot the letter tells us, under the front seat. Adam is smoking a cigarette, watching, and all of a sudden Investigator Simmons pulls out the bottle of colchicine. Adam was standing there, and I think the cigarette almost fell out of his mouth. He was definitely surprised. He didn't expect us to go out there and find anything in his vehicle. The bottle of colchicine was in a cardboard wrapper. The receipt contained a lot of personal information about Adam Yoder, and the address that it was shipped to, the chiropractic family office his parents own.
They also find an email address on the receipt.
Mr. Adam Yoder, 1990 Gmail address. He goes, but that's not my email address.
To know more about what happened at the office on the day of Mary's death, investigators approached Caitlin.
She was Adam's girlfriend, and she integrated herself into the Yoder family.
Start specifically talking about her relationship with Adam.
It becomes clear to Investigator Van Namey.
It's specific to what the letter mentions, and light goes off in my head, and at that point, I ask her if she's the author of the anonymous letter. When she didn't give me a no as an answer, that's an automatic flag for an investigator to ask the question again. I again said, if you're the author, we need to know, did you write that anonymous letter that we got? And she stated that she did.
She immediately became a suspect in the case, and her phone was examined.
Immediately, during the examination of Caitlin Conley's cell phone, was the Mr. Adam Yoder 1990 at gmail.com email address had been added to her personal cell phone as an account on the phone.
The final piece of evidence is the DNA on the cardboard wrapper around the colchicine bottle. It comes back to Caitlin Conley, nobody else.
This confirmed that Caitlin was indeed the murderer.
2.5 years after murdering Mary Yoder, Caitlin Conley is sentenced to 23 years in prison.
I am firmly convinced that the justice system does work, and that it did work in this case, and that finally we were able to get justice for Mary Yoder.
New Year's Eve was supposed to be a fun and exciting day, but it wasn't like that for Tyrone Hassel III.
New Year's Eve, we received a 911 call from a female subject. She was screaming into the phone, talking about her husband being shot, and then all of a sudden the phone went dead.
When I arrived on scene there, medical and ambulance was backing up in the driveway. As I exited my patrol car and approached where I saw the victim laying by his truck, along with a female subject knelt down beside him. She was pretty hysterical. I actually had to pull the female away from him so medics could actually get in to treat him.
After the doctors could do nothing to save the young man, the investigators searched for evidence at the crime scene.
We found spent gun shells laying on the ground right next to where Tyrone was laying. The shell casings were examined, and we determined it was from a 9mm handgun.
Based on what we found on Tyrone III, we saw that he had all of his money, he had an expensive watch on. So if robbery isn't the motive, then usually it's some kind of personal vendetta.
Here's how Tyrone met Kimia.
We could tell that he really cared about her because all he talked about was Kamaya this, Kamaya that.
When I finally met Kamaya, they were married and they came home for Thanksgiving. She called me dad immediately. She was my new daughter.
Tyrone called me one day and he just was like, "You about to be a grandma?" And I was excited.
My son was so happy. Then, a week after their son's first birthday, Ty and Kamaya was deployed to Korea in February of 2018.
The police received crucial information from a neighbor.
One neighbor indicated that they had seen a vehicle backed into a residence that was actually for sale.
He reported that the house was vacant. He described the car as being in that driveway and seeing somebody run from that car in the direction of Hassel's house. It looked like a male subject. The neighbor advised that after he'd seen the subject run towards the house, he heard the gunshots, saw him get in the car, and that's when he saw the car speed away rapidly. The witness described the car as a newer, dark color sedan. He described the headlights as being special headlights, which were LED headlights on that type of a car.
Just when there seemed like there was no way to sort out this mess, an anonymous message changed the course of the case.
This caller says that police should look into the wife because the wife had a boyfriend. And because of that relationship, Sergeant Hassel was killed.
The anonymous caller says their son served with both Tyrone and Kamaya and lives in the same town in Georgia.
2 soldiers actually came forward at Fort Stewart to the Army Criminal Investigation Division.
We were informed that Kamaya had been having a romantic relationship with another soldier in their unit, Jeremy Cuellar.
Jeremy was taken into custody.
On January 11th at 10 p.m., deputies in Georgia convened at Jeremy Cuellar's home to execute a search warrant and take him into custody.
While searching his car, in the back seat, they find a 9mm magazine that fits into a Ruger pistol. Looking through the bullets, it was the same brand of ammunition that was used the night of the murder.
The billion-dollar question was, did Kamia know anything about the murder, or was she innocent?
Kamaya admitted to Detective Lieutenant Longuski that she and Jeremy had both taken part in planning this.
What do you think should happen to you right now?
I don't know. Because myself, I feel just as guilty as him.
Why didn't you call up my house out this divorce?
I would have called it off, like, Jeremy probably would have, been upset at the fact that I called it off. And I didn't want him, mad at me.
Okay, but you understand, though, calling it off would have saved your husband's life. You could have divorced him.
We did discover that as part of their military insurance, when there is a death of a spouse, that she does get a settlement from the insurance company of about $400,000.
I brought up the money, and she admitted that was part of it.
With all this evidence, these criminals had to confront their punishment.
Kamaya was sentenced to spend the rest of her natural life in prison with no opportunity for parole. On July 29th of 2019, Jeremy Cuellar pled guilty to second-degree murder, with 65 years in prison.